maybe she's kind of feeling a bit obligated because I do all the technical stuff.
Well, this is true. However, remember, I like to talk.
Yeah.
I like to talk, and we agreed that we would be having fun. But
Yeah.
I do like to have something specific to talk about, because I
Oh, yeah,
think
me too.
maybe I think maybe our listeners like that. And one of these days, we're going to get back to the top 10 things that podcast listeners hate about podcasts, because I think we're violating every
Oh, I
single
told you.
one.
Yeah.
And every criticism that our buddies share with us is probably true. But you know
Oh,
what?
yeah. Yeah.
I really like what we're doing, and perhaps we're not everybody's cup of tea, but that's got to be okay.
Oh,
Listen, I wanted to go
absolutely.
before we start anything today, and I don't know. I'm assuming we're recording everything since we
Yep.
got
Yeah,
on.
I started that a second ago.
Anyway, so I just wanted to mention how much I enjoyed our discussion last time surrounding Howard Stern and all that. That was so much fun. And I wanted to mention how much I enjoyed, and this to our listeners as well, how much I enjoyed. Was it an up the middle broadcast, a podcast episode that you did recalling Howard's history, his
Yeah.
artistic journey, shall we say? Was it an
Yep.
up the middle?
Yes, it was. And what happened there was the episode I did at the beginning of my season two. It was like episode two. I woke up. I remember it was a Monday, and I woke up that Monday and we just started Yergz Radio on one of the. We're now on our fourth um, host. Like
Yeah.
you're on Spotify for Be Inspired.
Yep.
Just yesterday, we started with BR Logic.
Yeah.
Um, and I sound so much better. Everybody sounds so much better. I just turned it off, but for the first time, I was actually able to have my mic sending what I say to my headphones. With the old companies, for all the old radio stations, there was like a second delay, and it was just so making me crazy. But now, like a real radio station, I can hear myself in my earphones, and it's not going to drive me nuts. So I'm telling you all that because that day, that Monday, I woke up and wherever I saw it, it was Paul Harvey's birthday.
Wow.
And I did that episode live on the radio. And when I streamed it, I didn't have the camera on. I had, the thumbnail that I already made for Paul Harvey for that episode
Hmm.
because that's how you would have heard Paul Harvey. He was not on TV.
Right. 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 Right.
He was on the radio. That is my, I think I told you this before. That is my most watched video of all the episodes on Up the Middle for YouTube. And it is my most listened to episode in the audio only versions hosted by Spotify. So I thought if that's really what people are liking, not so much my political analysis, I'm here for them.
Right.
And so, and when I did that episode, I knew that I was going to do Howard eventually. And I said, and because I just did something on Dan Bongino, I said, and you guys know who it's going to be, and let everybody think it was going to be Dan Bongino.
No. Now
So when I
listen.
did the Howard one,
Yeah.
when I did the Howard one, I have my Howard wig right here hanging on one of the other microphones. I should have done it with that wig and a pair of sunglasses on, but I thought it would be too corny. And then after I did the episode, I thought that's exactly what I should have been was corny.
Yeah.
But anyway, I stopped at him leaving Infinity Broadcasting and terrestrial radio for Sirius.
Hmm.
And I didn't say anything about Sirius because I got to the time that I wanted it to be.
Yep.
And so I'm going to do a continuation when we come back from Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, I'm
But I
really
didn't
looking
tell them that
forward.
until the end.
I'm looking forward to part two, because that's what I remember. A
Yeah.
little bit before he switched to Sirius. But
Right.
yeah, I was more, let's say, engaged with his artistic journey at that point. Now, listen, maybe
Go ahead.
before we continue here, I'm getting a message on my screen
Okay.
that that I can't switch to my Yeti microphone while we're recording. Do you want to get off recording for a minute and let me
Oh,
see if
sure.
I can't
Yeah,
switch?
yeah, we can stop that.
Sure that I switched to the microphone. Actually, did I?
Oh, yeah, you are much
Okay.
loud.
Well, then I'm glad I stopped you, but I am sorry that what you previously said. Well, you did most of the talking, so it's fine
That's okay. Yeah.
about Howard. So,
Yep.
now we are recording again. So anyway, I'm looking forward to part 2 of the Howard Stern series. Now, I did want to ask you, somebody asked you when, I don't know, when you mentioned that you were the Howard Stern of Penn State, somebody, or that
Mhm.
that we had started a podcast together. Somebody asked you if I were black, like
Yeah. Yeah.
Howard's Robin. So what
Yep.
I want to ask you today is, if I were Robin, how might you describe me? If I were to become more like Robin, what would I have to do?
Well,
I'm not
I would.
familiar with her style.
So I wouldn't want that because that is the Howard Stern show. And while she's a co-host of sorts, she's just kind of the sidekick.
Okay.
And that's why I very aggressively said, no,
Yep.
you're not my Robin Quivers. We do this together. And
I just
like I
thought
just
I'd
said,
ask. I just thought I'd ask.
blah, 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 blah. You do so much to think of our topics for every week.
Yeah.
It's not, she sits in on writers meetings, but she just adds her 2 cents. And because, she's the snarky, a sarcastic, witty.
Personality. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I said in that video, she heard a tape of him when they were both in the DC area. She was up in, more in like rural Maryland or Baltimore, and he was at DC 101, which was actually
Mm-hmm.
also in Maryland. Um, and she just heard a tape of him,
Mm-hmm.
and she signed a deal right there. She never even met him yet.
I love it.
And she, as I quoted her as saying, she thought she was just going to, sit there and giggle all day while he did his show, and she was just going to do the news, and that was it.
Yeah.
And one day he just starts talking to her.
Yeah.
I think it was about in the movie. I think it was about his wife's miscarriage,
Okay.
because her line in the movie, he says, "I don't think I should be. I never talked. I never talked about this with anyone." She goes, "I don't think you should be talking about it now." Sort of egging him on.
That's great.
And uh, the management came to her and says, "We need you to be a friend here, Robin.
Yeah.
Don't talk to him. Just do the news." And she's, "I can't ignore him." So that's how she got her own room. She had like a mini studio aside of the studio that she could
Ah.
work from with her mic off and so on, and preparing news stories. And um, it wouldn't affect Howard's show, and that didn't stop him either.
Yeah.
He just, so Robin, what do you think? And
I love it.
she didn't let that dead air go. Like he
No.
stops or
Yeah.
speak, because
Yeah.
that's actually in terrestrial radio, that's illegal.
Yes.
You can't have dead air.
You can't
Uh,
not have dead air. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she just kept talking with him, and when he first went to, I think I said this in the episode, when he first went to WNBC in New York, she didn't come along
Ah.
because his first contract didn't include her or Fred Norris, and that pissed her off.
Mm-hmm.
She thought, we're a team now. I dropped everything for this, and now I'm stuck down here without you.
Mm-hmm.
And but no, it was only like a couple of months before he was able to get her up there,
Mm-hmm.
and it was mostly because of his bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
He convinced people who hired him without ever hearing a show, that she is the sane part, to answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
She is the grounding and the sanity,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll behave a lot better if she was here, which is bullshit.
Now, is that true in our case? Do you behave a lot better because I'm here? Your junior high school English teacher?
I was talking about that too. In fact, you and I talked about it also.
Yeah.
I think part of, just like the accusation of sorts that I made last week about you and Howard Stern, Mrs. Stahl does not approve,
Right.
but Jane does. And I said, with my swearing and kind of brute honesty, sometimes I think I like to do it because it's some tough love and it's honesty, and sometimes you got to swear to articulate a point.
Right. Right.
Don't just swear to swear.
Well, I remember on this topic, and I hadn't thought about mentioning this, but I remember when I retired, I thought, okay, now I can take off my Mrs. Stahl coat, right? And
Yeah.
be Jane. Well, what I found was that people were very uncomfortable with the change. And so I kind of met myself in the middle, shall we say, up the
And
middle.
I said, fuck it. And I'm about to show you.
Oh, no.
Find it. I always have trouble finding this goddamn video. Here we go.
Dead
Okay.
air. Yes.
I'm going to press.
What are you showing me?
Did you just hear Kevin Costner?
Did I just hear him? No, I did not.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to share the screen then. Hopefully that'll work. I don't know what it is about. Where is that? I'm trying to find it on my board. Anyway, let me share the screen. I'll put my headphones to my mic if I got to. It's a clip from Field of Dreams.
Oh, I love that movie. Many people do.
He's trying to get James Earl Jones's character to join him on this quest to figure out these voices in his head.
Okay.
And James Earl Jones says, "Go fuck yourself. I'm not interested."
Okay.
This is where he says, that's not the whatever his character's name was that I knew. So let me see if you can hear it this time.
You've changed. You know that?
Do you hear that?
Yes, I suppose I have. How about this? Peace, love, dope.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I actually cut that off because there's more that I didn't want to go out. But that scene essentially, I guess you too, in retirement, reflects both of us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. Yes.
I don't have the tight one on today because I'm planning on wearing this on the flight up to Pennsylvania. But I usually wear, what political podcaster that does a video podcast wears a tight Under Armour type long sleeve t-shirt
Right.
with long hair?
With long hair. Nobody I know.
Certainly not a Secret Service agent.
Certainly not. Well, I had to laugh. Your mother posted a photograph of you recently within the last week, and you had your short hair, and she said, "Oh, what a fine young man," or good looking young man, or something like that. And I thought, yeah,
I think she did something about sons or something like that.
I can't remember.
Sons.
I don't remember, but I know that she's looking forward to seeing you, as
Oh,
I
yeah.
am. But shall we get to some of these topics today? Like I said,
yes, but don't change who you are. You are my Robin Quivers, but with a much more intense and contributing role from the very beginning.
All right, that sounds good. Well, now today, like I said, you and I haven't spoken this week, but I've been thinking about it all week long and wondering what we would be talking about because nothing came to me, sort of, even though you will find in the episode that we are going to begin now. A lot of what I did this week is woven into what I hope to talk about today. And one of them, of course, is and then when I read the paper this morning, there were two articles that stood out, and I sent them to you. And the first one was on the front page of the Reading Eagle, and it talked about how men are dying like 5.5 years before women. And why was that? And there are no answers to that. And the article didn't discuss any amelioration of that, or, how we can prevent that from happening. Research will be done, was the end of the article. But what intrigued me was that it talked about quote unquote deaths of despair, and feeling despairing or depressing, hopeless, whatever, and then turning to alcohol, drugs, suicide, risky behavior, was attributed to the reason that women are living longer and men are not. That this deaths of despair. And I thought that was really kind of interesting. And, it led me into yet another article in the Reading Eagle about JFK, who's the anniversary of his death is coming up, of course, on Wednesday, November the 22nd.
Yep.
But, his famous line, of course, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And in another Facebook post, in the paper, there were a list, or was a list of baby steps, or a list of things that people could do in order to get away from this feeling of despair. So, think about those kinds of things. What might they be? And of course, a large part of it is wrapped up in his famous quote, ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you. And I've thought for many years that it was that the abolition of the service requirement that men were responsible for. That I thought maybe not everybody should serve in the military, but maybe everybody, men, women, should serve their country somehow for 2 years between the ages of 18 and 20. And that service requirement, I've always thought that. And there was years and years ago, decades ago, there was some kind of movement to do just exactly that. What do you think about that?
I think as a requirement, it's going to be
Yes,
considered
as a requirement. Yes, as a requirement.
It's constitutional.
Just like the draft was unconstitutional.
So that was not unconstitutional because that was at a time of war and an emergency, where the Constitution is where the Constitution is suspended. But during peacetime, I think they're going to have a tough argument to make that a requirement. Now, I like what Biden did and Obama before him, where they did. I forget it. Like it was towards. I think it was part of his forgiveness or Obama's, attempt at debt forgiveness for college students.
Okay. Yes.
They worked it off as part of the Peace Corps.
Yep.
That counted for military time.
Yep.
Not as far as like benefits with the Veterans Administration, but as far as, an equivalent to military time for working off college loans. I think that's a great idea.
I do too. I really do.
I think the Supreme Court's going to, because it's not cash payment, but it's a barter system.
Yep. Because my husband always, he reflects on the draft and was unhappy that it went away because he felt that it broke the self-centeredness of people, that it encouraged folks to think about things other than themselves and
Yeah.
acquiring material goods and, climbing up the corporate ladder and so forth and so on, that it invoked some sort of feeling of service and country and of the idea that we are all in this together. So along those lines, I really kind of agreed with him in that.
I don't think the draft can be put in at all on like a permanent level because that's the same thing as a required uh, service box to check,
Right.
you would call it.
You're
But
right.
if World War III does break out with what's happening in Israel and Ukraine and the China Sea, I don't think Biden's going to have much of a choice.
But
Um,
too.
well, probably not right away. The guys on the Para or Normal show that's also on Yergz Radio say that technology that the government has is about 50 years ahead of what we know about now. So take what we know about planes and so on, subtract 50. They had this, back in the 60s. And they were disciplined enough to not use it so as to not, reveal that it's out there. So if it came to it where China and Russia paired together and paired with Iran, we already are superior to them and we know it. That's one of the advantages of a democratic state or democratic republic is that there are checks and balances. And there are ways to say, do you really think you're the best? And
Mhm.
they got to prove it to each other. The president just called Xi a dictator again for the second time in a year, and that's a no-no in China. In fact, the extensive news coverage that our journalists and media are giving it is blocked in China. They think that they have a one-party democracy,
Do
and
you Why do you think there was a strategic reason that Biden said that twice in this year?
he is no dummy.
I
He's slipping.
agree.
He's slipping. He turns 81 years old today. Give it another 20 years when you turn 81. Yeah,
What are you saying? What are you
let that
saying?
sink in. That you're young and vibrant, just like Robin. Uh,
When I turn 81, yes, I'm looking forward to it.
in
Anyway,
another
so
20
you
years.
think that
Another 20 years. Did you hear that part, though?
no, say it again.
I said in another 20 years when you
20
turn 81.
years. Very good. Very good. Yes, I did miss that. Well, so
Uh,
you do think there was a strategic reason. Well, that's good. And I'm
yeah,
sure.
he's just like when the Obama administration began supporting gay marriage.
Okay.
If you remember how that happened,
Yes,
crazy
yes.
Uncle Joe went and said some off the cuff thing about supporting gay marriage,
Right.
and like later that day, the White House was lit up in rainbows.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
telling me they had those lights just sitting there in the odd event that they suddenly decide to support gay marriage?
I guess not.
Barack Obama's no dummy either.
Yeah.
He
No.
sent crazy Uncle Joe to do his job as vice president and say something
Yeah.
stupid,
Yeah.
and the White House rolled with it.
So I want to get into one of the things I want to get into, but before I do, getting back to deaths of despair once more and JFK's suggestion about service to the country. One of the people I interviewed for a podcast this past week is a guy named Greg Schweitzer. And he is a teacher, a counselor, as it were, teaches stress reduction meditation.
Nice.
And he's been doing that for 30 years. Now, interestingly, he was at the Boyertown's salt a Himalayan salt cave or something, and went to, I suppose, do a talk or maybe, offer some meditation techniques and tips at that facility. And his stepdaughter, one of my dear friends, Amy, who, by the way, is a fan of our podcast.
Nice.
Yes. Anyway,
Shout out to Amy.
Amy said, sent me, I said, I need to talk to this guy. And so she set me up and connected me with Greg. And so we had a podcast last week. Anyway, interesting, because I knew he was all about meditation. And when I first met him before we started our recording, I said, I meditate. Back in the day, back in the early 70s, I learned transcendental meditation, TM, that the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was involved in at that particular time. And I did it as a project for one of my graduate classes. My teacher at the time, her name is Marie Worsing. I loved her. Anyway, she allowed me to take the TM Transcendental Meditation course and keep a journal about my experiences and what I felt or what I thought or what it was like and so forth as part of my project. Anyway, he was all but stunned, because what he did for 30 years or for a number of years in Massachusetts, was worked under folks like Deepak Chopra.
Oh, yeah.
In teaching transcendental meditation. And it was really a really kind of neat thing to talk to him, to surprise him, I guess, with my own experiences in TM, and then to learn that that's what he did for a number of years. He left after a while when things got to be more corporate, let's say, I guess after the Maharishi died. And he says while he was there, he had session with a relearning session with George Harrison. And I asked him and he said that when he was working with George Harrison, that they went to a party together and George did some singing. And I said, did he sing My Sweet Lord? Because that's one of my favorite tunes ever that George Harrison did. Anyway, so when Greg left Massachusetts, he started his own practice, as it were, and calls it stress reduction. And it's all about meditation. Anyway, he talked about, or his life experience includes a degree in engineering and working as an engineer in an industrial corporate world for a number of years, and was so unhappy and dissatisfied. And his wife died. And again, stressing the misery or I guess the despair that he felt at that point, he met up with a friend and read Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which I'm sure is a book you're not familiar with, but it's one that I used to teach in Colorado, where this seagull, isn't interested in, spending the whole day diving for fish and feeding his face and so forth. This seagull is practicing his flying and getting good at flying because it brings him joy. And Greg went on to say that at some point in his life, just feeling despair, not being happy in his job, his wife just dying, he said to a friend, I wish I could be like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And his friend said, well, you can, and here's how. And that's how he gets started in meditation. So that's one of the things, that's one of the steps to address perhaps this depths of despair. And I'm eager for you to meet up with Greg, because I think he might be an interesting guest on our show. And, or maybe I even suggested to him, maybe he'd want to do his own, because he has a lot to say and he has a lot to suggest and techniques to teach and so forth. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to mention that before we got into the next thing I'd like to talk about. And that is the current, conflicts or disparate opinions about what's going on with the Israeli and Palestinian war. And, as Leslie, my friend Leslie, has said there's nothing good about anything. There's nothing right. There's nothing. It's a horrible, horrible situation from both sides. But she also suggested, or said to me, it's just the whole Kohlberg thing. Again, now let me see if I can explain this. You remember a couple of episodes ago, we talked about Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was just
All
thinking.
right. And as we become more moral people up the line, we move from, doing things because we are rewarded and not punished. We move along to not doing things because everybody's going to love us and the world agrees with us. We begin to form our own opinions, and we move along, if we can, beyond law and order. It's the law, therefore we should do this, that, and the other thing. 75% of America, thank God, is at least at a level 4 and respects law and order. We have a few individuals where in the news these days who don't seem to be fans of that, seem to be morally retarded, because as Kohlberg says, if you don't grow out of the law and order stage by the time you are 14, you probably never will, and will therefore be morally retarded. Now, my opinion is that, and then the 5th level, you do what you do for the good of the greatest number. Okay?
Right.
And it seems to me,
And that's where everybody pretty levels off for life.
pardon me?
You said the last time that's where everybody pretty much levels off for life, and there's very few level 6s in the world.
Correct. There may one per century, maybe.
Yeah.
Christ is an example.
Yeah.
But 18 is the limit for level 5. Okay? So, anyway, what I see here is Kohlberg in action. Hamas is what? Why go to war? Why kill? Because they want to eliminate certain people. I mean, what is that? I mean, are they doing that because they're having a good time? Level 1. Are they doing that because that's what their pastor, or not pastor, what their leader tells them to do? No independent thought here. And what amazed me, and I know this is going to come across wrong, and I'm sorry, I apologize to Palestinians right now, because I know this is about Hamas. This is not about the Palestinian people. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. But I listened to a podcast that had Yossi Klein Halevi and Danielle Hartman, 2 Jews, discuss the situation and whether or not there are moral red lines that should not be crossed in this war. I mean, there is such a thing as a just war, right? And there are rules of war, supposedly, which offends, just the idea of it offends me. But here were these 2 Jews on this podcast discussing whether or not it was right and is right for Israel to do what it's doing right now. And I know a lot of people think that it's not. And I have no answers. I have an opinion. But listening to these 2 Jews talk about whether there's a moral red line brought me to the opinion that you cannot deal with a level 1 or a level 2 Kohlberg in Kohlberg's world with level 5 thinking.
Right. David Beckmeyer.
It's impossible. You can't deal with people of that level, just like you can't deal with our former president in Law and Order. He's not that morally developed. You got to meet him at his level and maybe one level above, which is reward and punishment. And so there needs to be, as people say, accountability, because and the last thing I wanted to say is I was so touched, I guess that's the best word, in listening to this podcast between these two Jews, because I thought, here are these men able to even think about not fighting back, having a discussion about what we should do instead, when the people on the other side are just out to kill them, period.
Yeah.
I mean, can we, I mean, so obvious the differences in moral development as I listen to their podcast. And like I said, I mean, the Palestinians are suffering because of some of their own. Hamas. Do I blame the Israelis for trying to get rid of Hamas? I can't. I just can't. Okay, I'm done for now. Your turn.
Yeah, well, we're getting there, so I'll do a quick summary of it as well, and then
move along.
Everybody in the next one, yeah. David Beckmeyer said the same thing when he was with us. I forget what he called it, but like the absence of information, and the common sense appeal.
Okay.
Like, here's Donald Trump being indicted 4 times with 91 counts with witnesses who are all Republican. This is not a witch hunt. This guy's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And yet his supporters still don't believe that.
Yeah.
Still say it's the election was rigged. I saw one guy say that it's time for another civil war. I'm like, really? You're just blindly following that and not realizing that he could be wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And that is and look at them. Look at how they're dressed. You know, look at this, my screen right here. It's all in red, white, and blue. That's what they look like. You know, they're in red, white, and blue American flag cowboy hats.
Mm-hmm.
And they got all their Trump 2024 flags.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden doesn't need that. And he's still raising more money than Trump is.
Well, I have trouble now and then being hopeful, but I will send you my Biden bear, a photo of my Biden bear.
Nice.
I put aviator glasses on my little sculpture that I have here at home. It's very cute. I'll send you the photograph later. Nice. So I guess we've run out of time for this episode. Is that what you're telling me?
We have. We are there.
Sounds good.
This time, 32 minutes.
Well, one of these days we'll get it down. But if any of our listeners have anything that they'd like to say, please contact us. I'm Jane Stahl.
And I'm Yergz.
And this is Both Sides Now.
All right. See you, everybody.